Most of you are probably familiar with our speaker for this morning, David Keel. He has been an active member of UUCJ for over 16 years and has been involved with the spiritual studies group for all that time. As Peter said, he asked David to talk about how mystics connect to life and how they find meaning in the universe. Thank you, Dick.
There's a sign here that says, "Do not touch." Oh, I can touch, okay. I got permission from the congregation. Does that sound good? Okay. All right, well, I had a few opening words. As you use, our common connection, and we're talking about connections, that's what Peter wants to talk about, is social justice. We approach social justice issue from different perspectives and in different ways. One of the big differences is whether we view social justice journey from a spiritual perspective or from a strictly secular perspective. Does it make any difference from a spiritual perspective how we approach social justice? I think that our church is probably 1/3 atheists, 1/3 agnostics, and 1/3 spiritual mystics. But the common denominator is social justice. As existentialists, you use mean, and the definition of the word is they believe they create the meaning in their lives. The universe is basically indifferent. The difference with mystics is that a mystic has a sense that there is a universal meaning, something larger than just the individual perspective. Does this larger sense of meaning make a difference in how social justice is approached? I think it does. I have two friends who followed their mystical connection, and for a long time they were cloistered in monasteries. And then they found it too confining. They actually had a sense of wanting to do social justice along with their spiritual connection. Now they both are affiliated with religious orders that work in their local communities. But I don't think you'll find many existentialists in those spiritual orders. Jesus, who followed his spiritual path without regard for personal safety, was crucified. Buddha left his princely responsibilities, left his wife, left his child in the name of spirituality. Today, we might call him a deadbeat dad. The point is that spiritual connection can lead you to a non-rational path, to an unexpected direction, in an unexpected direction that may not appear rational to outside observers. There's a Buddhist quote, "Understanding is the ultimate illusion." If you understand, things are the way they are. If you don't understand, things are the way they are. So after many years of study, retreats, meditation, etc., today I will be discussing what I have learned about the mystical perspective. As you use, we have a historical connection with transcendentalism, which is a mystical perspective that was taught by Emerson and others. You can agree or disagree with the mystical perspective. My task is just to help you understand a point of view which you may or may not identify. I had a little meditation, but Penny did a better job than I did, so that was good. So just as a little introduction, I was introduced as being, when I came here 16 years ago, there was a spiritual studies class, and it has changed a lot. But I was raised Presbyterian, and I attended the Episcopal Church as an adult for over 25 years. I raised my children in that church. I completed a 4-year program with the Episcopal Church called EFM, Education for the Ministry. It was created by the School of Theology at the University of the South at Sewanee. This is what they say, it's a unique 4-year small group formation program based on study and practice in theological reflection. Been married been with my wife for over 55 years and have 3 beautiful daughters and a 2.5-year-old granddaughter, and I do think that is a spiritual experience. In my 20s, I wanted to be a Unity minister. My wife talked me out of that. But I read all of Charles Fillmore's books, who was the founder of Unity, and I also read many other Unity authors. Over 40 years, I've read hundreds of mystical books. For a decade, I meditated, and Kathy can tell you, from 2:30 in the morning to 3:30 in the morning. I don't know why, but I did. And for 3 years, I held actually a meditation group here at UU from 9 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. I was going to meditate anyway, so I said, well, why don't I see if people will show up. Read the Bible 4 times, received a certificate of completion for a year of graduate work at JFK University studying numerous spiritual subjects. For 10 years, I was involved with personal growth seminars talking about social justice or having the mystical journey or spiritual journey express itself. It was called Lifestream. Some of you may be familiar with it. In fact, I was president of the board for a number of years. And recently, well, not that recently, for over 10 years, I've been involved with LARSH, which is a community for adults with disabilities. As a matter of fact, I was so involved that 11 years ago, I moved from where I was to be close to them. And I was down there for 10 years, probably almost every day. And don't ask me why. I didn't really have a good reason, other than I felt connected. So you may not identify with anything I have to say, rightly or wrongly. At least I have put in the hours and done the work to hopefully be able to talk to you about this topic. And Peter asked me to give a sermon on the free and responsible search for meaning. My job is to explain the mystical view of how everything is connected. First, I'm going to tell you a story. There was a high society older woman in New York, and she went to her travel agent. She wanted to go to an obscure village in the Himalayan mountains. The travel agent tried to talk her out of the trip, saying it would be too difficult for her. She insisted. After a long and arduous trip, she arrived at her destination. She went to the local temple and requested an audience with the guru. She was informed that the guru was meditating in a cave for 6 months and could not be disturbed. She was persistent and explained she traveled all the way from America just to talk with the guru. Finally, she was told, you can go to the entrance of the cave, but you can only say 10 words. She agreed. She had to take the old bus to the ox cart and finally take a long walk to get to the entrance of the cave. And she said, Bernie, enough is enough. It's your mother. Come home. Some people feel, like the mother, that the mystical experience is just a passing phase. But others, like me, it is a lens through which all of life is seen. It's how I find meaning in life. It's how I understand my connection, back to connections to others and the environment. It's how I approach social justice. Let's first view the mystical journey of connection from a psychological and spiritual developmental perspective. Scott Peck, some of you may know the book, a psychiatrist and an author of the longtime bestseller, The Road Less Traveled, was one of the pioneers of transpersonal psychology, which is where the patient's spiritual values were incorporated into traditional psychology or psychiatry. The road less traveled, Peck described how some of his patients became religious as a result of therapy and others left their traditional religion. He wondered why. He developed a theory of psychological spiritual stages of connection. It's a simplification of James Fowler's 7 stages of spiritual development. By the way, a guy named Aurobindo had 24 levels of spiritual development. So you can parse this out any way you want. So I like Peck's because he's made it very simple. Peck viewed the largest group of people as being the base of the pyramid. So he saw life as a pyramid from a spiritual standpoint. The bottom were we're in a chaotic, egocentric state, seeking meaning and happiness through money, gambling, power, sex, drugs. It could even include good works to the extreme. These individuals who often found religion as a vast improvement over their chaotic lives because they were in chaos, and one of the traditional churches comes in and says, hey, how would you like to get your family back? How would you like to get your job back? How would you like to sober up? And so they provided that. So I never put down the traditional churches because they definitely supply a need. They offered meaning and positive direction versus their out-of-control lives. Peck saw a highly structured traditional religion as the second step to the pyramid. This group-centric state was a vast improvement over the person's previous chaotic life. Peck also worked with individuals who were in this traditional religious group, and they had problems and they left that group because they couldn't get their questions answered, or they wouldn't talk to them about certain questions. These patients could no longer live with what they viewed as the hypocrisy within the community and the community's unwillingness to ask questions about their basic beliefs. These were people who left their religion to enter what Peck called the third level. It's the search level. It's inclusive community. Hello, that's who we are. And it includes postmodernists, pluralists, progressives, Unitarian Universalists. We are certainly part of the third stage, as are many Buddhist and other non-traditional spiritual organizations. These individuals ask questions that previous 2 levels either were not curious enough to ask, not allowed to ask, or were afraid to ask. True searchers are fearless in their quest for knowledge. I see the search stage as a desire to connect to diverse people and diverse ideas. The top of the pyramid for Peck were mystics. Peck was not a mystic, but he had a basic understanding of mysticism. Since he was not a mystic, he did not describe the stage, which is what I'm going to discuss. What is the mystical journey and what is a mystic? I had a mystical experience at age 11. I call it mystical because it was an internal experience that resulted in certitude that I was more than just my body and ego. The experience changed my life 180 degrees. I think that's one of the qualities of a true mystical experience. Something has to change. I agreed with the mystic Kabir when he said, I glimpsed it for 15 seconds and I became a servant for life. I also agreed with his statement, it is the intensity of the longing that does all the work. So at age 11, I entered Scott Peck's third stage, which was the search stage. One of the problems with searchers is that they want spirituality reduced to a simplistic concept. As H.L. Mencken said, for every complex problem, there's an answer that is clear, simple, and wrong. Some pundits will tell you that mysticism is beyond words and then ask you to buy their book. I've read hundreds of them. So, of course, what am I going to do in these remaining 10 minutes? I'm attempting to explain with words my understanding of mysticism as simplistically as I can. And of course that's impossible, because we just said you can't do it in words. It sounds like a paradox, which it is. A paradox is part of the spiritual teaching to get you to look within, to go beyond limitations in thinking. As Leo Tolstoy said, only thing that we know is we know nothing, and that is the highest flight of human reason. So Zen Buddhism, they're famous for their koans. Like, what is one hand clapping? A koan is a paradoxical riddle used to demonstrate the inadequacy of logical reasoning and to provoke enlightenment. Here are some other spiritual paradoxes. Mahatma Gandhi, everything is insignificant. It's just significant that we do those things. Suzuki Roshi, everything is perfect, but there's always room for improvement. And to quote me, to know you don't know is to know. At least you know something that you don't know. For me, the mystical journey consists of three basic premises. The first is, I intuit that I'm connected to something larger than my body and ego. This larger something has many names. It's been called the transcendent, isness, God. Second, my sense of connection provides a knowingness that allows me to know what I need to do to stay in harmony with that transcendence. It really doesn't do any good to know that there's something there and you can't be in harmony with it and have no directionality from it. The communication is often ephemeral and rarely completely clear. As René Dumont, who was a mountain climber, wrote, you cannot stay on the summit forever. You have to come down again. One climbs and one sees. One descends and one sees no longer. One has seen. There is an art to conducting oneself by the memory of what you saw higher up. When one no longer sees, one can at least know. That's the journey of the mystic. My my most important job in life is to connect fully and meaningfully with it as best I can. No one can do the work for me. To do my job, I know I have to practice. Suzuki Roshi said, you can't make a date with enlightenment. Gaining enlightenment is an accident. Spiritual practice simply makes us accident-prone. It's important to be open to your inner experience. Reading books, meditation, teachers, discussion groups, or traditional mystical practices. I continuously lose my spiritual perspective because of life's unexpected challenges. It is my practice which helps me stay connected with the transcendent. My practice changes over time. It used to include spiritual retreats, extensive study, and a lot of meditation. Currently, my practice includes waking up and saying how thankful I am for life, family, and friends, morning exercise, 20 minutes of meditation, I practice music every day. I'm the worst musician you'll ever run into. But I practice this thing and don't have much talent, but to me, it's something that connects me to that harmony, and I don't know why. It's crazy, but I do it. The point of these practices is to remind me to be aware of my connection to the transcendent, which includes being in connection with others and the environment. Now, speaking of books, in my book, Pathways to Awareness, I have written about the 7 spiritual steps to freedom. So I'd have some books out there if anybody wants them. If you buy them, they're $10, and all the money would go to UUCJ if you're interested. So if not, that's fine too. The first thing is trusting that you know. This can be tricky because as we come to the mystical journey from different perspectives, if you do not have a sense that you are connected to something larger than your 5 senses, it will be difficult for you to understand mysticism. Many people I've met have an intuitive sense of something higher, but they don't always pursue their spiritual connection. In fact, I would say that's the bulk of the people. It's amazing to me when I talk to people when they're sitting around and we start talking about this. They'll come up with some of the most amazing things, but they didn't pursue it past that point. Second, find the spiritual way that is right for you. There is no one way. This seems obvious, but there are many who insist their way or their group's way is the only way. As your spirituality matures, you will change your direction many times. Our bodies are spiritual tools. We know how closely our peace of mind is connected to our body's well-being. Many of the doctors and hospital programs are now recommending meditation. A holistic spiritual regimen includes healthy eating and exercise. 4, contacting the spiritual voice within. I find a persistent practice best for contacting my spiritual inner voice. There is no secret to spiritual practices. Just be open and willing to move on to a new practice. In other words, follow your inner voice. For over a decade, I meditated, I indicated, from 2:30 in the morning to 3:30 a.m. Currently, I do not feel the need for this practice. As my life evolves, my spiritual practice also evolves. Keep what works and add new experiences. Visit new and different communities of spiritual seekers. Retreats are great for challenging and exposing you to different points of view. I've been to a lot of them. Fighting the spiritual battle. 5. As your spiritual maturity grows, our relationships with others will mature. It is often easier to meditate than to change how we deal with others and the rest of the world. We were talking about that in our spiritual studies class. If you're an ass over here and you meditate a whole lot, that doesn't really bode well for your spiritual journey. The proof is the value of our introspection is our outer behavior and attitudes. As we become more connected on the inner journey, we express a parallel loving connection, back to connections, to others and the environment. If you are not experiencing outer harmony, you should re-examine your inner practice. You may be in a rut and you need a teacher or to meet some new spiritual seekers. Being in community with others is always an important part of the spiritual journey. I've been in a group on Wednesday nights for over 16 years. I've been in this group here in church for 16 years. It's important because I might say something that, oh, it makes sense to me, and everybody else says, that didn't make any sense. And so it helps me, understand what's important and bounce it off of other people. 6, living in the now. To be present enables you to express your spiritual connection more fully. Of course, living in the now is easier said than done. And giving back to the world. As your practice grows, over time, you will naturally incorporate helping others, which is back to our social justice. So, my call to action is to encourage you to develop a spiritual practice. Even if it's no more than meditating 5 minutes a day, a spiritual practice has a lot in common with learning a musical instrument. To learn to play an instrument, you need to practice every day over a long period of time. And if you're like me, that doesn't seem to make a whole lot of difference. So you really need to, hopefully your spiritual practice will help. The spiritual journey requires persistent effort, leading eventually to a mystical awareness and connection that will always be with you. Anthony DeMello, who was a Jesuit mystic priest and psychologist, was asked, "Is there anything I can do to make myself enlightened?" He responded, "As little as you can do to make the sun rise in the morning." Then the student said, "Then what use are your are the spiritual exercises you prescribe?" He said, "To make sure you're not asleep when the sun begins to rise." So I'll just throw out, I've got a minute or two, I'll throw out one of my favorite quotes from Vedanta Hinduism. Love says I'm everything. My intellect says I'm nothing. Between the two, my life flows. And I'll give you the butterfly story. So there's two caterpillars. They're walking, crawling on the ground, and a big shadow comes over them. And they look up, and it's a beautiful butterfly. And one caterpillar says to the other caterpillar, "You'll never get me up in one of those things." That's the mystical journey. Hopefully I can get everybody up in one of those things. Thank you.